For as long as I can remember, I have felt different. I remember being a young child and thinking to myself, almost that like I didn't belong here. I was sent to the wrong planet. As a kid, I definitely played by myself a lot. Um, and I had an amazing imagination. I would play. My favorite thing to do would be playing outside and creating potions and playing in the woods and pretending and all of that. But a lot of it I played by myself. I didn't really do well with other kids. I always struggled to understand them, and I wanted them to do the things that I liked. I definitely, had special interests and wanted to do those things, and a lot of the other kids wanted to do other things. So I did well by myself and usually with one friend. I remember lots of teachers saying to my mom, Jessica puts all her eggs in one basket when it came to friendships and saying that I would just have one friend and wouldn't really branch out in friendships and made me feel like bad or wrong or there was something wrong with me because I couldn't have and maintain multiple friendships. And that was a conditioning I took well into my adulthood, always feeling like I needed to have multiple friends, but finding it incredibly difficult to do that. Not only to find people who were like-minded, but to maintain friendships was a challenge. As a young girl, I had imaginary friends that my mom said they started when I was around 3. So I had 4 imaginary friends. One was Jacques, one was Christ, one was Leaky, and my last one was Putsy the dog. And it's what's crazy to me today is that I remember what they look like. Like, I remember exactly what they looked like. And these were my friends. These were the people, the entities, the whatever that I interacted with throughout my first few years of life. When I asked my mom about it, I was like, "Were they did they just come in and out, or did I only play with them once in a while?" And she was like, "No, they were a part of our everyday life." Like, Jacques was the naughty one, so to say. He was the one that was always telling me to do or say bad words or bad things, and I would tell my mom that, "Oh, Jacques did this bad thing," or "Jacques blah, blah, blah." And what's funny is I remember him wearing a green shirt and having, like, kind of spiky hair and I think jeans, but he was kind of the naughty one. And then Christ and Leaky were the girls, and I remember Christ was in purple and Leaky was in pink, and then Putsy was a white dog, and he had some, like, brown spots on him. And we would be out in public, and I would literally look like I was holding a leash and being like, "Come on, Putsy, come on, let's go." Like, when I look back on it now, it's actually really sweet to me because I have 3 dogs currently, and my dogs are my huge support animals to me. They really do help me feel good in my body, feel more regulated, and I look back on my younger self and think, "Wow, like, look at me creating imaginary therapy tool that I needed." My little imaginary dog. Just so sweet. It's amazing what children's minds can do, just how resilient we are. Pretty cool. As I got older, I definitely learned to mask pretty quickly. I would see that there was a certain way you had to act in order to be accepted, recognized, seen, liked, and any of that. I picked up on that pretty quickly as a young kid and would watch how other girls would act and how things they would say and do and wear so that I wouldn't be seen as or sticking out like a sore thumb. And, it was funny because from a very young age, a lot of girls just didn't like me. And I could never understand why. Girls would say awful mean things to me or bully me, and I just was always so just dumbfounded. I didn't understand any of it. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. So I think that's why so quickly I learned to mask because bullying and being picked on happened pretty quickly in schools. And, it was hard. So I would, see the things, watch what they say, watch their facial expressions, watch their body language. I really believe that most of my life, a huge special interest of mine has just been watching people, like assessing people. I'm really good at like pattern recognition. There's certain scripts that I would go to so that I could communicate in a way that was socially appropriate or whatever it was at those times. As I got older, things definitely felt harder. In high school, it was a complete shit show for me. Not to mention that I was an undiagnosed autistic, but home life was really, really challenging. I grew up with a single mom. We were incredibly poor. My mom came from a pretty traumatic background as well, and so you can imagine, how things go with that. And my mom didn't have any of the tools or resources that we have now when it comes to, trauma and how that affects us and, our nervous system and all of that. So it was a pretty chaotic upbringing. And I was just so confused and always just trying to fit in, trying to figure out what the right thing to do was, or be, or say, or think, or wear. And it just was exhausting. When I look back at it now, I can see just how much burnout I experienced. And then school is a sit here, learn this way, do it this way, and that's it. And that's not how I work or operate. And now being older and understanding things and all my studies in human design and astrology and what this podcast is called is the quad right way when I'm a quad right. And so you can, if you know anything about that, it's just you look at school settings and they are just not set up for my type of brain. And so school was a struggle, a real struggle, not only academically, but also socially. I had just hit double whammy. And, I wasn't good at any sports because like I had tons of coordination issues, which I still do. But like again, looking at that spectrum, being on the spectrum, like, all these things make sense now and why I wasn't good at certain things or why things were so hard for me. Coordination and balance are still things I struggle with daily, but I just felt like I didn't have a place anywhere. I couldn't fit in with the sports people. I was smart, but not the type of school smart. Wasn't that. I wasn't super outgoing, so I wasn't gonna go with the drummer or those type of kids, and so I really, really was lonely and really couldn't find my niche of what was right for me. Luckily enough, I did have a couple really great friends that saw me and understood me and loved me. And to this day, I'm so thankful for their love because it got me through some really hard times. I had families take me in times of need and in really difficult times in my life. These people showed me love. I remember one day in high school saying to one of my friends, "I think I'm autistic." And I remember her looking at me and just kind of laughing, like, "Okay, Jess, like, whatever." Autism wasn't talked about at all. And the little things I knew about ADHD was about boys. Like, you didn't really talk about it with girls. I remember them talking briefly that maybe my brother had it and I had an uncle that had it, but it was never talked about being a possibility for girls. And I never saw it that way. And autism wasn't really something you ever talked about or really saw or definitely didn't understand. But for some reason, I just had this feeling inside of me that something was different. And for so many years, I thought my differentness was related to my trauma that I experienced as a young child and growing up. I just thought, I'm just so fucked up from my childhood. That's what's wrong with me. That's why things feel so different. That's why I feel so misplaced in this world. That's why I don't understand things the way other people do or do things the way other people do, is because I'm just incredibly fucked up from my childhood. And I carried that notion with me all the way into my 30s. After having my son when I was 25, I think is really when things started to be front and center for me. I was having to take care of another human being now. And there were so many feelings deep inside me that the way people were parenting just didn't feel right to me. Everything felt wrong. They would tell you to let your baby cry and don't hold them too much. And just all these notions that just never, ever hit for me. It always felt wrong. And so I quickly, in motherhood, was parenting very differently than I was raised and very differently than anyone else around me was doing. And as my son got older, I started to see things in him where I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. That's a little bit different. That's not what you would consider quote unquote normal." But also, it felt normal to me too. It's weird because a lot of the things that I saw in him were I had in myself as well. My son was about 4.5 when I reached out to someone and got him in some occupational therapy for sensory processing disorder. And he started at 4.5, and we were there for about 4 years. And during that time, I sat in on every single occupational therapy session. I got to watch the therapist work with my son in this large kind of gym area. And also, there were other OTs working there with many other kids with different disabilities, kids on the spectrum, kids with sensory issues, kids with ADHD, like all over the place. So I really got to take in and absorb a huge amount of information when it came to understanding senses, understanding that we actually have 8 senses, not 5, which I plan to do a whole other podcast on because it's incredibly fascinating. So I really just took in so much of this while he was going through his occupational therapy, and all the things that I was taking in were really resonating with me, where I was like, wow, this all feels super familiar. I understand this. This really is starting to explain a lot of things that I'm feeling and thinking. So it wasn't long after that where I went to my doctor and was like, I think I might have ADHD. A lot of these things are kind of resonating. And so she put me in contact with a psychiatrist, and I went and I did the testing. It was awful. It was some 70 something year old white male who just quite honestly, like, I didn't feel comfortable. It was a terrible experience. That's just it was just terrible. But I had to do it because I wanted to know what was going on with me. And so I did the testing, came back that, "Oh, yeah, you have got ADHD. You've probably got some bipolar, some personality disorder, some PTSD," and I had a couple other labels they threw in there. So I was like, "Okay, cool. This is ADHD. Great." So went back to my doctor and she put me on a prescription for ADHD medication. And I remember taking it and sobbing to my husband because I was like, "Is this how you feel every day? Is this how other people feel? Like, this is insane. I can't believe this is real," because, like, I would, like, need to do something and just be able to do it. My brain didn't have a constant thousands of narratives going on at once. It allowed me to focus on things. It allowed me to do all the things that were always such a struggle for me. I felt like, "Oh my god, this is it. This is the thing. Now I'll fit in. Now I'll be like the other moms. Now I'll be like the other wives. Now I can do all these things. Look at me go." And I took that running. I did everything. So, I mean, I really did. I felt like a new woman on this medication. It was life-changing to me. I was like, "Oh my god, things that were so hard before now feel so much easier. I don't struggle so much." I remember the doctor saying to me one day, we're talking about the medication. She was like, we're talking about like side effects. And she's like, "One of the things that people say when they take this medication is that they kind of lose their sparkle." And I was like, okay. And I remember thinking, well, that's not me because look at all I'm getting done. Look at everything I'm accomplishing. Like, I'm not losing my sparkle. Like, this is all sparkles. Look at how great I can do these things. I really valued myself on my ability to just get a lot of things done. I think that was how I judged myself and considered myself worthy, was because, oh, look at all the things I can get done. Oh, I can be the mom that works out and is fit and healthy, and be the mom that does everything for her kid and goes on play dates and does all the stuff and takes her kid to do things and makes his lunches and make sure the house is clean and organized, everything's put away and everyone has their laundry away and everything is always presentable and looking good and our yard is great and it was constant. Oh, I look back on it now and I couldn't do a quarter of what I did then. So, medicine was helpful, yes. It helped me, I think, move through some pretty challenging times in motherhood where I probably would have struggled a lot more. It gave me that boost to push through, but that's what I was doing. It was a lot of pushing through. I was pushing through natural boundaries within my body, but I couldn't feel them because of the medicine. And so, as years went on, I would always have this voice in the back of my head that something there's something more here. It's not just this. It's not just ADHD. It's not just my trauma. There's more here. There just is. I know it. I can feel it. That's when I started a lot of my research on autism and specifically how it shows up for women. Because a lot of the research that exists out there has to do with young white boys. It isn't until recently that we actually have studies going on for autism and how it shows up in other people, in women, people of color, different backgrounds. So, my understanding is that a lot of times with autism in boys, you see a lot of external symptoms of it. It shows up externally. But with girls, we suppress a lot of our symptoms, and so we experience a lot of internal symptoms. And when I read that, I was like, "Holy shit, yes. Yes, yes. Thank you, thank you." Because my whole life, the internal part of me has felt like a complete fucking dumpster fire, ridden with anxiety and fears and depression and sensory issues up the wazoo that I had to suppress my entire life. And it was getting to a point where I was feeling so angry every day. I would have this anger like burning inside of me, and I felt irritated all the time. And I just remember being like, I don't want to feel like this. I don't want my son to have it aggravated, irritated mom. I have got to figure this out. I've got to figure what's going on. And so, in all my research of autism, everything I was reading, it just really was giving me that gut feeling, that like deep feeling of like, move forward with this. This is something. And so I continued that. And I would say to friends and family, I think I'm autistic. I think I'm autistic, guys. And I was mostly met with, "You're crazy. No, you're not. You have great social skills. You make eye contact. No, there's no way." And I just kept being like, Okay, okay," and kept moving forward. My son in was it 2021, 22, 22. We went through an evaluation and had him he was tested for ADHD. And so during that time, I talked with his therapist and I was like, "Hey, do you have any recommendations for anyone that does autism assessments for adults?" And she's like, "Yeah, I've got a couple people, da da da." And she's like, "Do you mind me asking who this is for?" And I said, "It's for me." And she looks at me and she's like, "You make such good eye contact." And I was like, "Yes, I know. I know I do. But what you don't see is the physical pain it causes me to make that eye contact." And so she gave me some referrals to some neuropsychologists. I believe that's the correct term. Not totally sure. One of them had like a 6 to 8 month wait. And so then she gave me a referral. And so then I was put in touch with another neuropsychologist and they had like a few month wait, but I was like, "That's fine. That's okay. Just put me on the list." Because we're paying cash for this isn't an insurance-based thing, I ended up moving up the list, and so I only had to wait, I think, about a month for me to have my first initial appointment for an autism diagnosis. And so the first appointment, I brought him my previous diagnosis papers and things from my childhood and, my past history stuff, and kinda shared those things with him. Initially Actually, throughout the whole thing, I was incredibly uncomfortable. I feel like in my experience with this, people doing this type of work, I feel need to further educate themselves about people on the spectrum because I never felt during any of this time that he truly understood what autism was. But so initially getting there it was uncomfortable. I was really nervous and I had to go through, several days of all this testing. They've got computer things you've gotta do. They'll read you questions you have to answer. You have to do this memorizing thing. There's puzzles you've gotta do. There's, like, books with no words that you have to narrate. You have to, you know, create some sort of thing out of some random objects they give you. Just a lot of really taxing stuff. For one of the evaluations, there was a woman doing it with me, and I just completely froze. Like, I felt like I went so far back, like, into my younger child years of, like, feeling immense, like, shame or just awful, just feeling awful, and I just broke down and started sobbing right in the middle of one of these tests, which was timed, and she's like, "I can't stop it, I'm sorry," and I'm like, "Well, this is what it is," but I felt like in that moment, I was just sobbing for all these years of feeling like this, of feeling like shit, of feeling so uncomfortable, of feeling so misunderstood, and here I was in a place, where I thought they understood me, and I still felt so uncomfortable. So, I think on day 2 or day 3, we were doing some puzzle testing and things, and there was one thing in particular that I thought to be fun and was very quick at, and that, like, made me feel good. I was like, "Oh, here's something. This is fun. Okay." And so it had to do with, like, pattern recognition, which is something that I am very good with. Most of the tests that went on were very taxing and confusing to me, and if I'm being quite honest, like, it just felt very childish, like, I felt so in ways it almost felt demeaning, and that was something I wasn't expecting to feel, but that's how those tests are set up, or, that's how these people determine their diagnosis, but it's not something I feel like people can have better experiences than I did going through an autism assessment. I feel like people can do way better because it really was a struggle for me, but my determination was I want to know. I want to know if this is true. I want to know if I'm autistic. And about 10 days before I was going for my testing, I decided that I was gonna stop taking my ADHD meds because I really wanted to be my truest self during this diagnosis. Like, I wanted to show up, like, as me, not not the medicated me, but me. So, I quit taking my meds 10 days prior to the diagnosis. Went through the 3 days, 7, 8 hours of testing and was called back. And some of the things they give you, they send you home with some questionnaires for your spouse or family to fill out. And so you fill out a sheet about yourself, and then your spouse or family fills out a sheet about you. I had my husband fill out the sheet, and I filled out one. And so when I went back for the assessment for to go over the results, he brings out things and he was like, "Oh, okay, so this is your husband's, this is yours. On yours, you scored pretty high, so this would show, like, maybe higher on the spectrum, but your husband, he scored a lower score about you, so your husband doesn't see what you see." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I understand that." And he's like, "Well, why do you think that is?" And I said, "Well, I do a lot of masking. I hide a lot of parts of me from the world out of fear, out of conditioning, out of this is how I've always done things." I said, "I also believe that my husband may be a little bit on the spectrum and that these things don't appear weird to him like they would to other people. So how I act and how I do things is normal for him. This is how I've always been, so it doesn't seem abnormal to him." And he was like, "That's an interesting observation." And I was like, "Yes, I know." So he runs through all the testing, the scores of this, of that. "Well, you're pretty normal here, you're normal here, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "Well, here's some things that, you had some struggles in." And he's like, "And in this, you scored in the 98th percentile, completely off the charts. And this has to do with pattern recognition and coding." And I was like, "Yeah, that hits. That makes sense. I feel like pattern recognition has been how I've survived this whole life, is just understanding patterns in people and social situations and all of that." And so at the end of it, he was like, "You're autistic. Bye." They don't offer any aftercare or support when you're an adult that gets diagnosed with autism. There was nothing. There was no follow-up. There was no, "Hey, here are some resources. Hey, you could try this. Hey, you could try that." Absolutely nothing. So here I was with the diagnosis, which honestly, that diagnosis set me free. It set me free because it was like I finally had an answer to why I have felt this way my entire life, why I have felt that this world doesn't work for me, doesn't fit me, because it doesn't. This world, our systems and structures are created for neurotypicals. It's not created for neurodivergent. So it was liberating to get that diagnosis and to finally be like, "Oh, God, it's not, I mean, it's me, but it's not me. I'm not the problem here. The systems, the structure, society is the problem." People's inability to see beyond their noses, to educate themselves further, to understand neurodiversity and the complexity of it, to understand autism as a spectrum. A spectrum. It doesn't look the same way for everyone. It looks different for everyone. So this really gave me that permission slip to cut the masking. I was like, it really did open me up to be more of my true self, to let those masks that I've put up my entire life, to let them fall down, to show those parts of me that maybe I thought were weird or bad or wrong, or to say the things that I wanted to say because I would hold back so much because people would always get so offended with my bluntness. And how I understand things is in a very literal way sometimes. And people would get mad if I would question things. And now I realize that it's not me. It wasn't me. It was people's inability to understand things or to whatever. So a lot of unmasking has been happening in my life the past, God, it's been over a year now since I got that diagnosis. A lot of unmasking. And I have gotten to a place where I feel free. I feel free to be me. Oh, it's like emotional to say that because I never have before. I've never felt free to fully be me. And in my unmasking process, I definitely had a lot of fears, a lot of fears. Like, what if people don't like me? What if people are like, who the fuck are you? What are you doing? Like, you're so weird, or you're this or that, or you've got so many issues, or like, but I have found that the more I unmask, the more I become me, the more I show those parts. People have been nothing but accepting and nice and kind and interested, supportive. God, these are things that I didn't know were possible. I hadn't experienced them ever. So, letting all these guards down, letting all these masks down has helped me, I think, trust people in a different way now, in a deeper way. Friends and family, my amazing husband who has been my biggest supporter and rock through all of this. Like, he encourages me to be and say and think and do how I want, not how other people expect me to be. We have such beautiful conversations now. I feel like I can ask for clarity in things where before, when I would ask questions, people would get upset with me. But that I think the understanding of my autism and how I understand the world, I share that with people now. I let them know, hey, I'm autistic, and this is actually how I need to take in information, or this is how I speak, or this is how I do things. And none of it is meant to be rude or anything like that. Like when I ask, I'm just looking for clarification because I'm misunderstanding. And what I have found is that I have misunderstood about 70% of my conversations with people. So I found that the more clarity I ask now, I'm like, "Oh, that's what you mean." Like, with my husband when he says stuff, and before I would just assume something negative, and now I ask for clarification. I'm like, "Oh, I thought you meant this," and he'll be like, "Oh, no, no, no. That's not what I meant. This is actually what I meant." And it's completely something different than what I was thinking. So, it's just my brain works in a different way, so I need to ask for clarity and clarification more often than maybe a typical person. But I don't feel bad about that anymore because the more clarity I ask for, the more clarity I have within myself. And then the more confidence I have within myself. And confidence is not something that has come naturally or easy to me. My whole life I was not confident at all and really, just felt worthless. So to come from that place and then to get to where I am right now feels really big. And the cool part is I am so not alone. I can't tell you the how many conversations I've had with other women who have gone through similar experiences to me and have shared a lot of the things that I experience as an autistic. So many women. And what is also interesting is it is very common for women not to get diagnosed with autism until they're in their 30s, their 40s, later in life. Again, because all of the research that had been done was on young white boys. So people talk, oh, autism's like so big now, so big. No, it's just because we have more information about it. And the studies they're doing actually involve women now. So we can understand how it shows up for us. And it's different than boys and men. It shows up differently. And so education around how that can show up for women and getting that out there is so important to me because I have so many friends that are experiencing a lot of the things that I've gone through and wondering, "What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me?" There's nothing wrong with you. Your brain works different. Your brain works different, and different doesn't mean bad or wrong. It's just different. And I'd really like for people to understand that more in the neurodivergent community or in the typical community as well. Like, I think we can all learn so much from each other. But the world has been run by neurotypical people. And I think it's time for us to shed some light on the neurodivergent brain and give us a stage, give us a platform, give us a place to share our experiences and how it shows up for us. Neurodivergent people are so creative, so inspiring. I look to my neurodivergent friends for so many things. It's really a beautiful community to be a part of. And I want there to be more positivity and more education and more understanding about how it all works and how it shows up differently. There's a ton of sensory aspect that goes into it. I think that understanding the nervous system, understanding how we work on different levels is all stuff that I feel very passionate about and that I educate myself on constantly because I find it so fascinating how different we all are. And if you've ever looked into astrology or human design, that I feel just you go even deeper with that. Like, I love looking at my human design chart through the lens of neurodiversity. Like, I love seeing parts of my chart that basically show, like, yeah, you're meant to be this way. Like, this isn't a mistake. Like, you're here to share this and to show this to people. So, like, that feels inspiring and empowering to me because I don't look at my neurodivergence as a hindrance. It is 100% who I am and a part of me, and I want to share it. I want to share it with everybody. I want people to feel empowered with their differences, not to feel bad or wrong. Because that's where I spent most of my life, and let me tell you, it felt like shit. It felt like shit. So, to be in a place now where I have the understanding, I'm constantly educating myself, I'm constantly talking about it. I've done over 10 years of therapy. I have spent tens of thousands of dollars and tons of healing. I do work. I work on myself. I do the work. I don't just accept something and then say, oh, this is it. I'm hopeless. No, get the information and I keep working on it. I keep looking at aspects of myself that need support, that need further education, that need to rest, that need to go. Whatever it is, I'm I don't just accept things at face value. I'm always looking for more. I'm always digging the surface. And I think that's what I would encourage you to do is just dig deeper, ask questions, ask more questions, question everything, but make sure that you know yourself. I think being able to get to a place where I'm in my body and I can feel what is right and what is wrong, despite what the world says, despite what the world projects on me, despite what everyone said to me, Jess, you're not autistic. You're crazy. You're crazy. You're crazy. I didn't listen. I didn't listen to any of that because I knew in my body I was right. I knew it. I didn't need external people telling me. that I wasn't. So oh, okay, you're right. No. And I think that's something that we all have access to. We all have access to the power within our bodies, our intuition, our gut feelings. We have that. That's not just for certain people. We all have access to it, but we are conditioned out of it so quickly as children. And I think a lot of the work I've done, a lot of the healing I've done has been coming back to myself, coming back to my true self and what that feels like, being in my body, experiencing what that's like, listening to my body. Those have all been really powerful tools for me in managing and working through my neurodivergence. So, if you are someone that can relate to some of the things I've shared, or if you have your own autism journey that you want to share with me, I would love to hear it. I love hearing different people's experiences and how things show up for them. I'm going to leave it at that. And if you have questions, send them to me and I'd be happy to answer them on another podcast episode. But thank you for letting me share this bit with you. And I'm really looking forward to sharing more parts of my life with you. That's kind of what I want this podcast to be, is me sharing my life experiences with you, and you can take from them what you need and leave the rest. But yeah. All right, everyone. Have a great day.